So we'll discuss today a little bit about the mitzvah of Techelles. We know there's a mitzvah min Torah of tzitzis, that if one is wearing a four-cornered garment, one has an obligation to put tzitzis on. In fact, it's a machlokas in the Gemara, if you're wearing a five-cornered garment, whether you have to put tzitzis on. We paskin yes, albeit you only have to put on four corners. You don't have to put on five corners, but you still have to put on the strings for the four corners. And the Mishnah tells us in Menachos, whether at Techelles ma'akeves es halavan, in other words, does having Techelles an obstacle, an impediment for us of doing the mitzvah of tzitzis? In other words, the different opinions of how much Techelles one has to put on the tzitzis, but whatever the opinion is, whether it's 1, 2, or 4, however Techelles you need, let's say you don't have the Techelles. Is the mitzvah of tzitzis still intact, or there is no mitzvah of tzitzis? And we have had Techelles for about 1,000 years. That we'll get into whether we have it now, but until this point, we haven't had it. So is the mitzvah intact? So that's a machlokas in the Gemara, machlokas harishonim. The Baal HaMor went with the minority view that if you don't have Techelles, you have no mitzvah of tzitzis. And apparently the Ramban writes that the Baal HaMor never wore tzitzis. The Baal HaMor felt there was no mitzvah of tzitzis during his time because there was no Techelles, and if there is no Techelles, there is no mitzvah. And therefore, perhaps there might even, in fact, you might even be in trouble, because if you're wearing a four-cornered garment and not fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis, you're running into an issue, because you can't wear a four-cornered garment without putting tzitzis on. So, in fact, that's why even min Torah, you could have either according to us b'nei Ashkenaz, any beged is good, cotton, silk, wool, or linen. But according to the Svardim and different opinions in the Gemara, Machlokas Rav Nachman and Rabbi, one opinion in the Gemara is that only wool or linen is a biblical beged. In other words, if you're a Svardi and you wear a cotton beged, you'll only get a mitzvah midrabanan of tzitzis, because they hold that's not a min Torah, it's not considered a beged. So even according to Svardim, people only wear a wool garment, why don't they wear a linen? Why can't you wear a linen garment? Because if you wear a linen garment, you're going to put wool strings on, and therefore that would be a problem of shatnez. What do you mean? Why is it a problem now and it wasn't a problem 1,000 years ago? The Torah tells us. How could the Torah tell me I have to wear linen and then tell me it's shatnez? So of course the Torah doesn't tell me that. We learn that from the Smichas HaParshiyos and the juxtaposition of the Psukim. The mitzvah of tzitzis is put next to the prohibition of shatnez. So we learn out aseh docha lo saseh. The mitzvah of tzitzis supersedes the prohibition of shatnez. So therefore, when you do the mitzvah b'shleimus, so when you do the mitzvah, so you can wear a linen garment and wool strings as long as you have Techelles on those wool strings. Then you're in fulfillment of the mitzvah. In other words, as the Radvina Rabbi, who in the late 1800s, he wanted to get ready to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash and make sure we're ready, because one of the things a Kohen needs in the Beis HaMikdash is the Big Day Kahuna. And one of the things of the Big Day Kahuna is has to have Techelles. And according to everyone, if you don't have Techelles, you can't do it. So the Radvina Rabbi wanted to get things going by looking for the Techelles. So he claimed he found the Techelles in the late 1800s. So therefore, regarding the Big Day Kahuna, it's not an issue yet. But everyone agrees you need the Techelles in order to do it. But by tzitzis, we paskin not like the Baal HaMor. Techelles, we assume Techelles is not an impediment for the level. We can do the mitzvah of tzitzis even without Techelles, as many have been doing since we lost the Techelles. So in fact, as I like pointing out, there unfortunately, in this area, the many Hasidim of the Baal Amor. I'd say most Jews follow the Baal Amor today and don't wear tzitzis. But I don't know if they asked the psak on that, but I'm just describing the reality. But that's the Baal Amor sheet. We don't go with the Baal Amor. We assume that you have to wear tzitzis even without Techelles. So the Radvina Rebbe came along in the late 1800s and said he found the Techelles. And therefore, and all his Hasidim started wearing it, and there was a discussion with the Gedolim. Many disagreed with him, saying it's not it, and others felt that maybe it was it. So, again, but no one would say 100%. And then, just to give you the history, and then later on, then Chaim Herzog was involved with it. He has a PhD or some other degrees on it, and he said it was he said the Ravina Rebbe's Techelles was wrong. In fact, it's interesting because I think in the Holocaust it was all destroyed, and the only way they were able to go back and do it is because they had the correspondence with Chaim with Rabbi Herzog, which is interesting. He said it was wrong, but he disagreed. He said it wasn't the right one, but he still had. So they were able to figure out how the Ravina. They don't care what he said; they care what his Rebbe said. The Rebbe said it was good, and until 1990s. Then they claimed early 1990s, they claimed they found it again through different tests. So no one will say 100%. Yeah.
What is the composition of Techelles? Where does it originate?
I didn't hear
what is the composition of Techelles?
It's some kind of shellfish, isn't it?
Yes, that's part of the discussion. Whether right now the latest one they said they found it is a snail. What is the Murex? I haven't pronounced it. I forget Murex something. It's a name to it, and it's like a snail. And that's cut off. It depends. Different times they don't know exactly what it is. They know it's the chilazon, but that's part of the discussion. Exactly what is that fish, or is it a snail? And then the Gemara gives directions in terms of how to get to that. But that's part of the whole discussion whether we have it. So no one. So I don't. What I say is even the Radvina Rebbe wouldn't say 100%. Why do I say that? I never spoke to him. Only because I say he never wore wool and linen together. No one's going to go that far. That if you have the mitzvah, you can wear a linen beged, wool and strings with done. No one does that today, to my knowledge. So no one has that much chutzpah to go ahead and say they know 100% that it is it. So on the other hand, there is. I heard one person say. There is 0% chance that this is the right one. So obviously if there's 0% chance it's the right one, there's nothing to talk about. And if there's 100% chance it's the right one, there's nothing to talk about. Most likely it's somewhere in between. No one could say it's 100%, and it's unlikely to say it's 0%. So the question is, we don't know. It's a suffix. So what do you do in a case where it might be Techelles, it might not be Techelles? What are the risk-rewards in putting it on? Is there any risk of putting it on? Or is there any risk of not putting it on? How does one come to the conclusion? So that's what we'll discuss some of the issues today in the pros and cons of potentially putting Techelles on your tzitzis. But obviously, Rov of Klal Yisrael has not accepted it to the time of Ravina Rebbe and Chaim Herzog even today, but it doesn't mean it's not time. We could revisit the question and discuss the pro. Again, I'm not going into. I'm assuming it's a doubt. I'm not going into. It's a separate share. Proving it is or it isn't. That we could discuss. I don't know if anyone could disprove it 100% and prove it either way. I'm assuming. In our discussion, it's some type of doubt. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So how does halacha view us when there's a doubt going on? So when the Radvina Rebbe, and perhaps we'll even see, maybe even if you think it's 100%, maybe you still shouldn't wear it. We'll get to that. We'll cover all the possible angles. Either there's a 0% chance, there's a 100% chance and you still can't wear it, or there's a 100% chance and you wear it, but you wear it without the Techelles. So whichever angle we're going to take, we'll see. So when the Radvina Rebbe claimed to have, today it's proven wrong, but when Ravina Rebbe claimed that he found the Techelles, he sent out letters to the Gedolim, or the Gedolim sent letters to him. He wanted, and he has a whole sefer on it. Give me, tell me how you feel. These are all my proofs. I think this is it. Tell me, do you think it is? Are you going to wear it, etc.?
It's a peer review.
Yeah, peer review. That's where we got it from. The Ravina. So again, many wrote back and assumed it wasn't it. Some wrote back and agreed with him, and some, So there's a famous letter written not exactly from the Beis Halevi, the Beis Halevi from the Soloveitchik family, but it was someone who was I guess a shamish, someone close to the Beis Halevi wrote a letter, and it's in the Ravina Rebbe Sefer. He says, you know what? So basically the fish that Ravina Rebbe found was one that everyone knew about. It was a fish that everyone knew about for the past 1,000 years. Many Talmidei Chachamim, etc. So the Beis Halevi wrote back, or someone said this is what he said anyway, that, you know what, if you could give me, historically speaking, a reason why this fish or snail disappeared for the past 1,000 years, 800 years, whatever it is, and you tell me why, I'll be the first one to put it on. But to tell me that we've had this fish in front of me for the past, all the generations knew about this fish, all the Gedolim before me, and no one thought it was it, so then I'm not gonna put it on. That was the Beis Halevi's letter. So in fact, the interesting, Rav Soloveitchik, the one in Boston, and the Briskers in Yerushalayim have a different tradition from the Beis Halevi. They have a much different tradition. They said, you know what? The way Rav Soloveitchik in Boston says it over is that, you know what? Even if you're right, you're wrong. Even if you tell me 100%, you're telling me you can prove it scientifically, etc., this is the chilazon, you're still wrong. In other words, you still can't wear it. Because he says we have a de facto Masorah. In Judaism, not only do we have simanim, but we have traditions. Let's say that was the whole discussion with the different animals. Let's say the turkey, and even to our day today, some people don't eat turkey. Some people don't eat turkey; they don't like turkey. But I'm not talking about that. Some people don't eat turkey because they feel it's not under the tradition of kosher animals. That it was an animal came later on. That's the whole discussion. Does it fall under the chicken, or do you need a special tradition for the turkey? In fact, I have a friend of mine who was a descendant of the Shlah. The Shlah was known not to eat turkey. So he always likes telling me, he has mishpacha that they'll eat chazer on Yom Kippur, they'll eat treif on Yom Kippur, but they won't eat turkey, because the tradition of the family is not to eat turkey. So obviously, that's a little joke. Obviously, better to eat turkey, but the point being is, to the different Masorahs, let's say the Rebbe would say, a pre-8 Hadar, I can't just go ahead and say, pick out a lemon and say there's an answer. We have to have a tradition on it. So the way this version of the Beis Halevi is saying is, even if you're right, you're wrong. Even if you could prove to me 100% that this is the Techelles, you can't wear it because there's no Masorah, or there's a de facto Masorah that it's not it. The fact that we had this fish or snail around, and the Talmidei Chachamim of the previous, no one said it was it, so therefore, according to that version, the discussion's over. Rav Soloveitchik was clearly against, you have to wait for the Mashiach to come until the Mashiach identifies the chilazon. Until then, so according to that, even if you're 100% sure, it doesn't make a difference. So they asked Rav Elyashav, who was one of the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, he's still very sick, I hear, but I think he's still alive. So he's one of the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. So the Badei HaShulchan, he's Rav Feivel Cohen, I believe his name is. He's a Rav in Rosh Hashiva in Brooklyn. He used to be, he still is, very close to Rav Elyashav. I think he learned there in Israel. He had Shema Shvehilchas Nida. They wrote a famous Sefer Badei HaShulchan on Inyanin, on all the laws of Nida. So he has a relationship with Rav Elyashav. So he wrote to Rav Elyashav and said, which one do you think? These are the two versions of what the Beis Halevi said. One version is, I'd be the first one to put on Techelles if you could give me a historical reason why no one wore it, why the mitzvah disappeared for 1,000 years, and all of a sudden we found it. or the version that even if you're right, you're wrong. It doesn't make a difference. You need a Mesorah, and we don't have one. That's the end of it. So he wrote to Rav Yashav a twofold question. He said, number one is, tell me which version of the Beis Levi you think is correct, and if you think it's the first one, then would you put on Techelles today? So again, he wrote back. He said, to me, the first version makes more sense. That if you could come up with he doesn't think you need per se a Mesorah to continue every mitzvah. In other words, the fact that if we could come up with a reason why they couldn't figure out this was the Chila zone before, so then he thinks in theory you don't need a Mesorah per se. You don't have to wait for the Mashiach to come to put on Techelles. However, would you wear Techelles yourself? So he said, I'll have to think about it. Basically, he wrote other places. The bottom line, he didn't put it on. In other words, and he writes, so one reason he gives, it's, Rabbi Yasha is one of the Gedolei Hador. So if you look at his tshuva, at least Rav Shechter, who's in the pro-Techelles camp, says it's not very compelling. He doesn't give strong reasons against it. In his tshuva, he writes, one of the things he says is, you know what? Everyone thinks they know what the Techelles is. The Rebbe said, I definitely have it. Everyone's got to wear it. Rav Chaim Herzog thought he had it. Okay, so 20 years from now, someone's going to say it's not it. So he's saying, he basically wrote a very vague tshuva how he's probably wrong also, which is not really dealing with the issue. Number one is, the fact that the other two are wrong doesn't mean he's wrong, and each time you build on it. But so he didn't, and that still wouldn't be a reason why not to wear it, because the halacha is, even if you're wearing fake Techelles, it doesn't take away from the mitzvah. In other words, there's no harm. He doesn't deal with the harm. So what Rav Shechter says happens is he spoke with the Techelles people who went to speak to Rav Yashav. So he believes this version of the story, that basically they went to Rav Yashav and he said, yeah, I think it's it. It sounds like the right Techelles. But then he asked him, he said, so do you have about Techelles about 20,000 Charedim to wear tomorrow? No. And what would happen if 20,000 people wanted it? There'd be a supply and demand. It'd be like $1,000, and people are starving, especially anywhere, but especially in the Charedim. The people aren't going to have food for the family. They're going to go out and buy Techelles. I can't come out and tell you that's Rav Shechter's version of what Rabbi Yashav. Others will claim he wasn't sure, and therefore he didn't put it on. But either way, but that's the question. What did the Beis Halevi write back to the Ravina Rebbe? Did he say the version that the Ravina Rebbe has in his Sefer, that I'd be the first one to wear Techelles if you give me historical reason why all of a sudden this snail or this fish came along, and why for the past 1,000 years all the Gedolim didn't wear. If you give me a good reason for that, then I'm open to wearing Techelles. Or the version that they say in Yerushalayim, and the Rav Shechter quotes the Rav as saying that even if you're right, you're wrong. Even if you could prove to me 100% that Techelles, I still won't wear it because you need a Mesorah. Since we lost de facto the fact that this snail was around and no one said it was it, therefore you need the Mashiach to come. So depending on which version you take, so if you take the Mesorah version, there's nothing to talk about. But Rav Yashav thought the first version made more sense. That what do you mean you don't need a Mesorah? It's the idea here. We don't. In other words, what changed now is everyone knew that the snail was there, but they couldn't get it to turn into blue dye. It was the snail that shot out black dye. They didn't realize if you open up to the sunlight, automatically, they're not going through any chemical process. They claim it always did have blue dye, just no one knew it. So it's not an issue of lacking a Mesorah. We always had this snail or fish. We just were lacking the idea. We just didn't know how to actually turn it into.
The Gemara actually talks about the economic factor. In other words, it's not, they did not just build it up for the Haredim. The Gemara already brings that you would create a situation that people could not afford it. The economic factor was major.
Right, so...
But it wasn't.
Right, that's a general question. If you assume if you assume it's Safek Techelles, like we all do today, so then the shaila is, are you obligated to spend money on something which is only a Safek? That's a separate issue. Let's assume you're at least in doubt about it, and how much money are you obligated to spend on, so one issue is the Masorah factor, whether you need one or not. And others bring down, so what about the principle of Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra? Okay, so I don't know, but we have a principle in the Gemara, a doubt regarding a biblical mitzvah you have to be strict on. So last I checked, Tzitzis and Techelles is a biblical mitzvah. We read about it every day in the Shema. Okay, so it's only a Safek mitzvah, so it would only apply the principle of Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra. So they say over in yeshivas in the name of Rav Chaim Brisker, that is, that why don't we apply Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra here? Because he says, when do we apply the principle of Safek? He wasn't talking about Techelles in general, he was talking about this principle. They're applying it to Techelles. That when do we say Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra? So let's say I'm not sure, I shook my Daled Minim today, but I wasn't sure if it was kosher. So I have to go ahead and go get it. I have to go find one that I know is definitely kosher and go shake it. That's Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra. But let's say there's only one in town, and the only one that's in town is a Safek. So they have to go shaking it 6 times. But I'm not going to gain by the second time, because if I keep on shaking that first one the second time, it's the same Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra after. So Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra only helps us after I do it the second time, there is no more doubt. I started off with the Safek, and now I did a Vadai, so then I go, but if after the second time I'm doing it, I'm still left with the same Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, that I don't apply so some claim, so by Techelles, even though you don't apply Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, because the same doubt I have the first time I'm wearing it, I can't do anything more to help my doubt. And others claim that this is against the Ran in Sukkah, that Rav Chaim's against the Ran in Sukkah, that we do say Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, even if it's a sub. Where do we see this Ran in Sukkah? So the Ran is talking about shaking Daled Minim. So let's assume you didn't get, it's the first day of Sukkot is biblical, the rest of Sukkot is rabbinical. So the first day of Sukkot, Ukapta Mechem B'Yom HaRishon, you have a mitzvah in Torah to shake Daled Minim. Let's say you couldn't get access to the Daled Minim until sunset. So sunset, Ben Hashmasha, the time between sunset and nightfall. In halacha, that is Safek Yom, Safek Laila. So the question is, did you bother taking this lulav and estrog during Ben Hashmasha? Because I'm only going to be in a Safek anyway. The Ran writes yes. The Ran says you take the lulav and estrog then, so it's mashra from that Ran, that even though it's only still going to be a Safek, so we'll see what the Rav Chaim camp went in, so we'll have to continue. So to continue our discussion on Techelles, so to review and continue, so the Rajvina Rebbe, who was anxious for the Mashiach to come, like all of us, from Hera Yibana Beis HaMikdash, and talk is cheap, so he wanted to actually do something. He said, what's going to happen? The Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt and we don't even have Techelles? Let's start making prepper now. We're in the time in Yemos HaMashiach. We're getting close. We should start preparing now. Let's get the Techelles ready. So therefore, when the Melech Mashiach comes, we'll get to do the Avodah right away. So regarding the Big Day Kahuna, if you don't have the Techelles, you can't even do anything. So therefore, we have to wait for the Karbanos and the Beis HaMikdash. But regarding the Techelles, so it's a Machokes in the Mishnah, Machokes Rishonim, whether it's Techelles Ma'akev es Halavan, the Baal HaMor Shita that it is, and there is no mitzvah of tzitzis, and the Ramban quotes the Baal HaMor. And interesting, the way Rav Shechter says it over, that the Rav Salvation used to say, like, what? I can't believe that Baal HaMor wasn't buried in a talis. The fact he didn't wear a talis his whole life, that didn't seem to bother him so much. But the fact he was saying, like, what? He wasn't buried in a talis, was this really quarter of salvation, that was a very. So I guess I was thinking about that. I guess because if you look at it, does sound crazy, But on the other hand, like if you think about talis because really the halacha of tzitzis is if you're wearing a four-cornered garment, you're obligated in wearing tzitzis. But you don't have to wear a four-cornered garment. There's the Gemara in Menachos about Katina. This Rabbi or Mr. Katinas. He wasn't wearing. See, the Zmana Gemara, they had four-cornered garments. The Dafka had to do something not to put on tzitzis, either to make it a three. So I think either maybe he made it a three-cornered garment. He wasn't wearing a four-cornered garment, not wearing tzitzis. It's Katina. Tzitzis matahei. So he said, what do you want from me? I'm not wearing a four-cornered garment. So the Gemara says, yeah, you're right. But the Idan Rischa, when God is steaming, watch out. In other words, basically, tzitzis is like a life insurance policy. In other words, you're right. You're not going to get punished for not wearing tzitzis, but wearing tzitzis could save you. So that's what Tosas points out at the end of Sota, that Moshe was mitzvah to fulfill the mitzvahs hatzchuyis ba'aretz. Because why? Because he said he wants to fulfill. He didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael because he heard about the good shwama there and the lafa, but he wanted to go to fulfill truma, ma'isa, shmita. The question is, what's he getting all worked up about? He wasn't there, so I'm achayev. So what's the big deal? So obviously we see from Moshe Rabbeinu that we should emulate Moshe Rabbeinu to try to put ourselves in a situation where we can keep as many mitzvahs as possible. And in fact, interesting, there were some Sephardi kehilos, I think not anymore because they moved to Eretz Yisrael, where there's a chutzpah. I think it's different opinions in the Bali Tosas here in Sota. Chutzpah. You like Moshe Rabbeinu, you want to do it, how about keeping the regular mitzvahs first, like chutzpah, that you should emulate. How dare you wear tzitzis? The minhag was, the Rav of the Shul was Dugmas Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rav, but the Baal Batim to wear tzitzis, how dare you think you like Moshe Rabbeinu? So there were some kehilot, Sephardi kehilot that didn't wear tzitzis. So I'm just saying, if you look at that, in the context where you have shitas where, like the Baal Amor, that there was no mitzvah tzitzis, then Rav Shechter's chumrah makes more sense. Rav Shechter has one of his arguments that I didn't mention this morning, why he says one has to wear Techelles, meaning he thinks today one should wear Techelles, and in fact he says if you don't wear Techelles, you're better off not wearing tzitzis. And in fact, as I know someone who asked them, I teach high school, I teach a boys' high school, so should I tell them this, that if you don't put on Techelles, you should take your tzitzis off? So he said, yeah, that's Rav Shechter, that's his sheet. Of course, the guy was smart enough, he didn't want to get fired from his job, so number one, he didn't want to be fired from his job, and secondly, obviously it's not the normative halacha, but Rav Shechter feels that way. But now I'll tell you what it's based on, then at least in the context I gave you, at least I understand it more. Because, I understand it from I'll tell you his sheet. There's a Beis Halev which quotes from the Turei Even, who has a sheet regarding Baal Tigra. There's a biblical prohibition about Tosef and about Tigra. So the Turei Even writes, what is Baal Tigra? Baal Tigra isn't, if a person only puts 3 parashios in the tefillin, or let's say 3 minim, so it's not Baal Tigra, you didn't do the mitzvah, you're about to a mitzvah saseh. Baal Tigra, according to the Turei Even, is if I do the mitzvah, in other words, I can do a mitzvah bishrei muso, I can do a mitzvah in an ideal way, but I specifically do it in a way where I'm yotze the ikar hadin of the mitzvah, but I don't do it properly. So in other words, according to Rav Shechter, this is it. That since today he thinks it's enough of a suffix that one should wear Techelles, so he says like this, he says, if you don't wear Techelles, you're in violation. He's saying it's only, even though it's only a suffix Techelles, but he's saying is, if you don't wear Techelles, you're in violation about Tigra, and therefore you're better off not wearing tzitzis at all. Because he's saying if you wear lavan without Techelles, you violate Baal Tigra. I think. The question is, what would everyone say when let's say Bisman and Beis Hamikdash when Yevade has Techelles? So maybe Turi Evan would definitely say that. It's a chiddush, I guess. I'm just thinking it's only a suffix Techelles. So he's saying even in the case of a suffix, because he's saying suffix, he holds suffix the Raisa L'Chumra you put on. So he's saying the halacha demands you to put on out suffix the Raisa L'Chumra, and hence you violate an issue the Raisa about Tigras. He holds better, and if you hold you violate about Tigra, it makes a lot of sense. Everyone agrees you don't have to put on a 4-quarter garment, so I'm not doing anything wrong per se. But if I put on a 4-quarter garment with the lavan without Techelles, I violate about Tigras. Or if Schechter is saying that it's a no-brainer for him, don't wear tzitzis then. So that's crazy to anyone who hears it. I'm not saying I wouldn't tell someone halach l'maisa, but I'm saying if you take in the whole context of what I was telling you, Tosis and so to the Svardi Kehilas about, where, because to us it's crazy we're brought up tzitzis and that's it. But I'm just saying is, again, so number one is, do we pass it like that Turei number one? I mean, that'd be my, and is Safek Techelles the same way? And it's hard to say that when Rove of Klal Yisrael are not wearing Techelles. I'm just saying, Rav Schechter says it, and he's entitled to say, it just seems like a wild shit, so that's why he holds, you have to make a sin. He says, you gotta get the Techelles. And if you don't, you don't have to get the Techelles, just don't wear tzitzis if not, which is a wild thing. Interesting, Rav Shlomo Miller, who discusses, he has back and forth with Rav Schechter, not directly by name, but he's cholek on him in different areas. He doesn't like because Rav Schechter says the Ran goes against Rav Chaim, and therefore Rav Schechter said, well, I don't have to follow Rav Chaim if he's against the Ran. Rav Shlomo Miller says, no, Rav Chaim's working with the Ran. It's a different case. So he says, I think his question is, don't sneeze at an Adam Gadol. What he was saying is, don't make quick thirst of a Rav Chaim saying he's against the Ran. If you really understand Rav Chaim, he's not against the Ran, and he has a beautiful shtickle Torah in terms of getting into subject of Raisa L'Chumra, etc. But that's what he doesn't mention Rav Schechter by name. But that's who apparently he's going against. So Rav Shlomo Miller himself, he actually has the strongest raya. Let's say this would be. I mean, it wouldn't be like he says. He says his argument is, to me who hold the Techelles is in Rio, there's no problem for you putting Techelles on your tzitzis. But to you who think it is Techelles, he thinks you're over about Tigra, about Tosef. Like the opposite of Rav Schechter. Like, what do you mean? Because he says there are different shittas in the Rishonim. Rashi, Rambam, Ravid. How many threads are the Techelles? So he says it's not Nipsa, it's not Pasch in the Shulchan Aruch, so we don't know. So he says if you put on one, maybe it's two, and then you're violating about Tigra. If you put up two, so he says, if you hold it's real, he says if it's fake Techelles, you don't have to worry. But if it's real Techelles, which you think, then you have a real problem. So Rav Schechter would answer, it's not a kasha. I'll have to. You take out the Kole Hor. So the fact that Shulchan Aruch doesn't. The question, I guess, it comes down to if the Shulchan Aruch says nothing on the issue. Does that mean end of discussion? Or okay, so you go with the. What did you do before the Shulchan Aruch? I mean, he didn't say. I'm just saying that obviously you have Kole Hora, and therefore Rav Schechter feels that. Okay, so you go with the. You see which Rishonim, and I think he claims you could. There are like Mishnah Brewers and other stuff that do pass in the Shaila, but let's assume they don't. Okay, so let's go see. So you have the Rambam versus Rashi. I mean, we usually pass like the Rambam. So you have a better. So you go with the Koli Hora and you're passing. So, but I'm just saying. So obviously, Rav Shlomo Miller doesn't accept Rav Schechter's argument. I'm just pointing out both. I'm not making any decisions who's right, who's wrong. I'm just saying is Rav Miller holds you. Those who are wearing. I'm just pointing out that it comes out that Rav Miller holds anyone who's wearing the Techelles is either in violation about Tigra about Tosef, and Rav Schechter holds anyone who's not wearing it is violating about Tigra. So either way, there's no safe haven here. I mean, you have to make a stand either way. But those are just some of the issues. We'll have to continue on Techelles 3. So we'll discuss today a little bit about the topic of Techelles, that blue string one puts on one tzitzis. The Torah tells us, we read every day in Shema about the mitzvah of Techelles. There's a mitzvah in our Torah of tzitzis, and in addition, part of the mitzvah of tzitzis, we have the mitzvah of Techelles. So let's discuss that for a little bit. So go.
Not a little bit.
So go.
They record me also?
Absolutely.
I better keep quiet.
So the Ravina Rabbi, and in fact a lot of Hasidim who wear the Techelles today, he said we're getting close to the time of the Mashiach. Mashiach's coming soon.
It's true, it's getting closer. I don't know when it's coming. We're getting closer.
Every day.
Every minute.
And then so they Machakak. So therefore he says, well, how's it going to be? The Mashiach's going to come. We're going to build the Beis HaMikdash, and then we're going to start draying around looking for Techelles. Let's go find Techelles now.
What happened to the, say, the ones that say the come down from heaven?
The blue thread.
Oh. What does it say? They come down from heaven.
Yeah, so however it's going to be.
You don't have to worry about it then.
The Machlokes, Rashi and Rambam, whoever's going to, whether the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt through a miracle, Be'esh Yibaneh, or we assume it won't be. However it comes down, he says we're going to need the Techelles to do the Kohen has to wear the big day kahuna.
Yeah.
And therefore, we better find the Techelles now, so when the Kohanim want to do the Avodah, we're ready. However,
another miracle of the snail will go right up to the Beis HaMikdash.
So by tzitzis,
Tell them I'm the Techelles.
So by big day kahuna, you don't have an option. If you don't have the Techelles, there is no mitzvah. You can't use the big day kahuna. So until you find the Techelles, we can't do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash.
So that means they had Techelles while they were until Tisha B'Av, really, when they couldn't, a couple of weeks before Tisha B'Av, when they couldn't do the
as long as they had,
daily tummy.
unless they had it, they could have made a lot of Techelles and had it, but they couldn't. You need, in order to do the work in order to put on the big day kahuna, you need Techelles.
In other words, they did the Techelles up to the pig that stuck in the wall.
Exactly. So therefore, either the past 900 to 1,000 years, whenever the last time it was.
More than that.
Yeah, whatever it is, you can figure out whatever the years are. But in that area, no, because they're wearing Techelles even after the Beis HaMikdash. The Amoram, and they were even wearing Techelles, it seems, even after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed.
They're wearing it right now.
Yeah, okay, that's a question if they're wearing it now. So they point out that when it comes to tzitzis, that's a different story. The Mishnah says in Menachos, HaTechelles, it's a machlokes in the Mishnah actually, whether HaTechelles ma'akev es halavan or not. Whether having the blue string is an obstacle in performing the mitzvah of tzitzis. One opinion says yes, another opinion says no. We paskin no. We paskin we can do the mitzvah of tzitzis even without the Techelles. Albeit the Baal HaMor disagreed. The Baal HaMor never wore tzitzis. He said there is no mitzvah of tzitzis without Techelles. In fact, that seems to be the minhag of most of Klal Yisrael. I'd say most of the Jews today follow the Baal HaMor, that they don't wear tzitzis.
But not the religious Jews, not the Shomer Shabbos.
Right. I'd say the observant Jews do not follow the Baal HaMor. But at least the others follow the Baal HaMor. He said there's no, they probably never heard of tzitzis to begin with. But either way, the Baal HaMor never wore tzitzis apparently.
It's hard for me to believe that.
It's hard for Rav Salvation to believe that, and the fact he wasn't buried in a talus. But either way, the bottom line is we don't pass him like the Baal HaMor.
Why wouldn't he be buried in a talus? They cut the tzitzis off.
Yeah,
It's just a shawl. That's all. But a tzitzis, the talus is a shawl.
I know, but he never wore tzitzis, so therefore he never put it. Perhaps he never got buried in a talus either.
Okay.
That's a separate discussion. So either way, they point out that we paskin, we fulfill the mitzvah in our Torah of tzitzis even without Techelles. So So when the Radvina Rebbe said he figured out the Techelles, he sent a letter to the different Gedolim of the generation to tell them, do you agree, disagree, tell me why, tell me if you like it, you don't like it. So many responded, many didn't respond, most probably disagreed, and some agreed. But there's a letter from the Beis Halevi. The Beis Halevi was, let's say, the Rav from Boston. So his father was Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. His father was Rav Chaim Soloveitchik.
And the next one was the Brisker.
And Rav Chaim Soloveitchik's father was the Beis Halevi. So the Beis Halevi...
The Grizz? Who's the Grizz?
Yeah, the Brisker Rav. Yeah. So they point out that he wrote back and said to him as follows. He didn't actually write the letter himself. One of his acquaintances wrote the letter. And he said, you know what? This is at this time they found it was the cuttlefish, whatever it was at the time that they thought. He said, you know what? If you could give me some historical reason why this fish disappeared now and previous generations couldn't figure it out, then I'll be the first to wear the Techelles. But this fish that you're telling me is the Chilazon, my parents knew about it, my grandparents, all the Gedolim knew about it of the previous generations, and they didn't say it was it. So if that's the case, then we have a Masorah that it's not it, because if it was it, the other great rabbis would have figured it out.
If it was it, they'd have been caught.
If you could tell me, if you would have told me it was a fish that this got rediscovered, we could discuss it. So therefore the Beis Halevi rejected the opinion of the Ravina Rebbe. That's one version of the Beis Halevi. The Rav from Boston, Rav Soloveitchik, and the Briskers in Jerusalem, they come up with a different reason. They say no. The Beis Halevi said even much stronger than that. He said, even if you could tell me 100%, you could prove through archaeology, scientific studies, dyeing, whatever you want to do, and you'll tell me, you could prove to me 100% that it's the Techelles, you're still wrong. Even if you're right, you're wrong, because no matter what, we can't restore the mitzvah that's been lost from...
I'm wrong, I'm right.
Exactly. Just like you say, like Lo Susser, even when the rabbis tell you left is right, you still have to follow them.
Yeah, but what's supposed? Suppose one guy says left is right, and the other guy says right is left. Which rabbi do you follow?
That's what we'll have to discuss when we get on the power of the Chachamim.
Oh, okay.
But either way, the Beis Halevi is saying is, it does, and that's what the Aruch HaShulchan seems to write as well, that a lost mitzvah cannot be restored unless you have a Navi, a Mashiach, someone has to come and restore it. So basically this version of the Beis Halevi closes the door on the topic. However, there's two versions of the Beis Halevi. What's the practical difference? The practical difference is in the early 1990s, others claim they found the Techelles. But they said it was a snail that no one knew about. So according to the first version of the Beis Halevi, if you could come up with a good reason why we didn't know about this snail, he'll be the first one to wear Techelles. But if you go with the second version of the Beis Halevi, he's not interested. No matter what you tell me, it's wrong. So which is the more correct version of the Beis Halevi? So they asked Rav Elyashiv this question. And Rav Elyashiv thought the first version is correct, that if we could figure out through modern science, archaeology, other reasons, that it is the Techelles, and we could come up with a good reason why the previous generation didn't know why, so we're open to finding the Techelles. So they asked him, okay, if that's the case, so are you going to wear Techelles? So is this the real Techelles then? If you tell me you're open to Techelles, is this the real Techelles? So he said, let me think about it. And he basically didn't wear it. He came up, he said, no, he said, because who says this one's right? Maybe in 10 years from now, we'll disprove. This like we know the Ravina Rebbe is wrong, Rav Herzog is wrong, all these are wrong. So you'll probably find out this one's wrong also. So he doesn't want people to wear the Techelles. But he doesn't really deal with the issue. He just says maybe you're wrong or maybe you're right. In fact, according to Rav Shechter's version, who wears Techelles, he says Rabbi Yashav agreed it was the Techelles, but that's what the Techelles people told him. If he thought it was the Techelles, then why didn't he come out and say it? He didn't say it because, number one, he said, he asked him, he said, if I tell you this is the Techelles, would you have enough Techelles for 20,000 Charedim? The guy said no. And if I did, and
you have enough for 40,000. You only gave one string.
And if you didn't have enough, and he said, how much would it cost to? You would have enough in the supply and demand. The price would cost $1,000. And he said, how could I tell people to wear the Techelles when there are thousands of Charedim which are starving today? They don't have food for their family. If I told them to wear the Techelles, they'd spend $1,000 on Techelles and not get food for their kids. So therefore, I can't say that I can't tell them to wear Techelles. So therefore, I'm not going to come out and say it.
Who said? Who was the Rabbi who said that?
That's Rabbi Yashav.
Oh.
According
He's
to
a Haredim?
what?
I guess he is.
Yeah, that's Rav Shechter's version of what happened. Others don't the same.
Of course, nothing's not
Is there
disputed.
anything special you'd like to do?
Others will say.
Like to read one of the books?
Others will say it's a Techelles
Huh?
that he didn't like. So that's
I hear you.
so that was an issue. So we assume that's a fundamental issue. Number one, if you accept the Beis Halevi's version, then we have to wait for the Mashiach. And if you accept the other version of the Beis Halevi, then there's what to discuss.
Huh?
Then I'll be the first one to wear 'em.
What?
I'll be the first one to put them on.
So the question
Then the next question is,
they
how
ask
do they put
is,
them on?
the question they ask is, what about? The question they ask is, what about? So let's assume it's Suffolk Techelles. Let's assume it's doubtful. We don't know. So we have a principle, Suffolk Daraisa L'Chumra. We have a general rule in the Talmud. A doubt regarding a biblical law was strict on. A doubt regarding a rabbinic law was lenient on. So
this can't be Raisa. It says in Shalachot.
So Techelles is a biblical mitzvah. So therefore, if I'm not sure, why don't I apply the principle of Savek Daraisa L'Chumra? That's the kasha. So they say over in the yeshivas b'shem Rav Chaim Soloveitchik.
There's so many Soloveitchiks around here.
Then when do we apply the principle Savek Daraisa L'Chumra? That's only, let's say right now, I have my Daled Minim, my 4 species. I wasn't sure if mine is kosher. So you come to me, I come to you and say, could I shake yours? Yours you know are kosher. So then I say, I go and I shake, I don't want to make another bracha, but I go ahead and shake your Lulav Esrog because Savek Daraisa L'Chumra. Right? That's subject. So that's what we normally apply. If you're not sure if you did a mitzvah in the Torah, you do it over again. So it comes along with Rav Chaim and says, that's only if, after you do it a second time, the doubt is resolved. But if the doubt's not going to be resolved after the second, third, and fourth time, so we don't apply the principle of Savek Daraisa L'Chumra. And therefore, he says, by the case of Techelles, it's not going to help. He doesn't talk about Techelles, but we apply it to Techelles, and therefore, we still have to go ahead and try to find and make sure it's the real Techelles. So therefore, we don't apply Savek Daraisa L'Chumra in this case. That's what the anti-group says. Comes along Rav Shechter and says, we do apply it. We do apply Savek Daraisa L'Chumra. What about Rav Chaim's Taina? No.
Then you better get off the blame.
We see from the Ran in Sukkah differently. We see from the Ran that let's say it's the first day of Sukkot, where shaking Daled Minim is biblical. U'lakachtem lachem b'yom harishon. So the first day is biblical.
And you can borrow one.
So let's say the first day is over, but it's Ben Hashmashos. It's in between sunset and nightfall. Right? It's in between sunset and nightfall.
It's the first day or the second day.
So, what should you do? Should you bother shaking lulav and esrog?
Why would you shake lulav and esrog at night anyway?
No, it's not clear if it's not. It's Safek Yom, Safek Laila. So the Ran says to shake it. So we see from the Ran, even though...
What day would it be? Even if
no,
he says to shake it, he doesn't know what day.
Exactly. So what do we see from the Ran? We apply the principle of Safek Daraisa or Chumrah, even though after I finish shaking, I don't know if I got the mitzvah or not. So we see against Rav Chaim. Right? Because even though my suffix isn't resolved, but he still says to do it anyway. So that's the kasha. And so Rav Chaim seems to go against the Ran. So Rav Shechter says, I don't have to follow Rav Chaim if the Ran's against him. Comes along Rav Shlomo Miller from Toronto, from Lakewood. He says, no, don't take lightly the word of an Adam Gadol. Rav Chaim knew that Ran, don't worry.
Sure,
Yeah, so what's the pshat? Rav Chaim would agree to the Ran. There's a big difference. The case of the Ran's case is, it's Ben Hashmashis, there's nothing else for you to do. Once I shake the lulav, that's it, there's nothing more for me to do. So if there's nothing more for me to do, so then I can apply Safek Daraisa L'Chumrah and do it again. But in this case of the Techelles, what am I helping? Safek Daraisa L'Chumrah, I can still go at it. I have to go make sure that the Techelles is real. So therefore, Rav Shlomo Miller says you still apply Safek Daraisa L'Chumrah, and therefore that's why you wouldn't, according to him, you wouldn't, you don't apply Safek Daraisa L'Chumrah, therefore you don't wear Techelles today. And Rav Shechter says you do apply, you do wear. Rav Shlomo Miller says something else. He says, according to me, I think it's not the Techelles. So even if you're wearing the wrong Techelles, it doesn't make a difference. It's okay. If you're wearing the wrong blue dye, you still get your mitzvah of tzitzis. So according to me, what you're doing is you don't ruin the mitzvah. But according to you, you have problems. Because according to you, you say it's the real Techelles. There's a machlokas rishonim. How many strings go on? Is it a machlokas Rashi, Rambam, and the Rabbi? Whether it's one string, two.
Instead of being lenient, he's stricter.
So he says, and since we don't know how to paskin that shaila, so he says if you put on one string and really you should put on two, you violate Baal Tosef, you violate a biblical prohibition. And if you're supposed to put on two and you put on one, you violate. So he says.
Too well.
So he says you're in trouble if you put on your Techelles. And so therefore he says don't put on.
Now I know why the Baal Amor never wore tzitzis.
And Rav Shechter argues the opposite. Rav Shechter says today, now that we have Techelles, if you don't wear, he says it's better not to wear tzitzis at all than to wear tzitzis without Techelles. That's Rav Shechter's opinion. Why? What's the logic?
I'm sure when he was a youngster he didn't have Techelles.
Yeah, I know. But everyone agrees if there's no Techelles, you wear tzitzis.
Oh, but it's not us.
Right. The question is now.
Amor said it was us.
Yeah, that's for a different reason. He says there is no mitzvah. It's not us, or it's meaningless.
Well, yeah, just like wearing you can wear anything.
No, I'm saying it's different. The Baal Amor says it's meaningless. You get no mitzvah. Rav Shechter's saying it's worse. Because he's saying like this, the halacha is,
when would you make a bracha?
According to Rav Shechter?
Either one of them.
You make a bracha when you put on your tzitzis.
According to who? Respondents, it's the wrong.
According to Rav Shechter.
The one who says it's no mitzvah. Why would you make a bracha?
No, according to the Baal Amor, you wouldn't make a bracha, you wouldn't wear them.
That's something different. But what about the one who said you wear them and it's okay to wear them? Then he said that's a mitzvah.
Yeah, if you're the one who says to wear them, you make a bracha.
Okay.
So according to Rav Shechter, So according to Rabbi Miller, maybe you could argue if you wear the Techelles, maybe you should make a bracha because you're doing an Aveira. But that's a separate question whether mitzvah of Aveira or not. But according to Rav Shechter, he's saying is because if you don't wear tzitzis, so you're not doing an Aveira, you're just not fulfilling a mitzvah. But according to Rav Shechter, if you put on a four-cornered garment, if you put on a four-cornered garment, and we have the Techelles, you don't put it on.
You don't have to do an aseh.
Yeah, so he says you'd violate Baal Tigra. So therefore, Rav Shechter says that's a that's a wild opinion. Most don't assume like. So others want to say, well, I'm not going to wear because it's mipsik to Yehu. It looks like he's showing off. Look, these great rabbis aren't wearing Techelles. I'm going to wear Techelles. So
the great rabbi that didn't wear tzitzis.
So Rav Shechter says you don't.
Baal Hamor is the only one. You ever hear of anybody, any other rabbis?
No, but I'm saying
famous rabbis like that. It's really
You're not wearing Techelles.
I'm saying he's not wearing any kind of tzitzis. Really.
No, I know. Here I'm talking about is you're not wearing Techelles.
I wouldn't understand it, but I don't expect to because like this guy, he has a good reason for it.
Oh, Baal Hamor?
Yeah, but I don't understand. I don't know why I wouldn't wear tzitzis.
I'll tell you, his reason's simple. He says, because if you don't have Techelles, there is no mitzvah.
And if there's no mitzvah, you can't wear it at all?
What's the point? You can do anything you want, but there's you
can put it on, I guess, without a bracha.
Yeah, you can put them on, but you won't get a mitzvah, so what's the point? Why would you wear them? And the only reason to wear them if it's a mitzvah. If there's no mitzvah, then what are you doing? It shows you're not doing it for the mitzvah then.
Well, but you only have to do it if you have a four-cornered garment. So
yeah.
If you don't want to wear a four-cornered garment, it's almost the same thing. It shows you don't care about the mitzvah. So.
I know, but here in that case, it's different because if you wear a four-cornered garment, you could get it. According to the Baal Hamor, there's nothing you could do.
Yeah.
There is no mitzvah, period.
There's no tzitzis.
Until we find Techelles.
You're saying there's no tzitzis, period.
Yeah, no mitzvah of tzitzis, period.
There's no tzitzis because we don't have the blue dye.
I know.
So anything else is no good.
Yeah, so the question is, according to the Baal Hamor today, if you found the Techelles, then you have more of a reason to do it because you can get the mitzvah. According to the Baal Hamor, you'll be restoring the whole mitzvah.
Did you see one of these rabbis in the last 50 years walking around without tzitzis?
No.
And people would
there was a minig
lock them up, I think.
There was a minig among the Sephardi Kehilas, only the rabbis wore tzitzis, not the Balabatim. Because who are they? They're going to imitate Moshe Rabbeinu? They're nobodies. Moshe Rabbeinu is great. He wanted to fulfill more mitzvahs. But there was a minig in Sephardi
Kehilas. Is the 613 mitzvahs only for the leaders? What's going on? I don't understand that either.
No, because tzitzis was a voluntary mitzvah.
I mean a voluntary mitzvah.
If you're wearing a four-quarter garment, then I'm obligated to put on.
Yeah, but there's a lot of assays that are, you don't do them if the situation doesn't demand it.
You like what?
Like hiring workers, if you don't have to pay them if you...
Yeah, that's something else. I don't know how they compare it to tefillin. Tefillin you have to wear every day.
Yeah.
That's I'm contrasting tefillin to tzitzis. Tefillin you have to wear tefillin every day. Tzitzis I don't have to. In theory, in practice we do. And that's why. So therefore, so we see the different opinions. Yesh v'yesh of those today who those who put Techelles on the tzitzis, and those who don't. Speak to your local rabbi or posek to discuss the issue with him, whether he feels it's appropriate for you to go acquire.
Today the ones who wear Techelles,
yeah.
How do they attach them? Some people say they do 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. Is they do that differently, or they're doing it the same?
I asked that question to people. People do it differently. It depends.
Oh.
Even if you do Techelles, not everyone agrees on how you do it. There are two different issues. There's one issue: do you wear it? And even if you do wear it, then how do you wrap it? Those.
If you wear it, And it is real Techelles, but you wrap it wrong. What's the final thing?
then
It just says useless too.
It's
Maybe.
no,
I
yeah,
don't
but
know.
it's no harm. Well, according to a Miller time, according to
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Schechter.
it wouldn't be a harm. You don't lose anything by it.
That's Miller.
No, yeah, but Miller says if it's fake Techelles, you don't lose anything by it. If it's real, you're running into problems. Rav Schechter holds if it's real.
Well, he says it's fake, so it.
Rav Schechter holds it's not a. Rav Schechter holds if it's fake, it's not a problem. If it's real, you get a mitzvah.
Oh, but if it's not real, you don't get any problem.
No, there's no problem.
Okay.
You know, you miss me on a mitzvah lechatchila. We'll have to call it here.
Can't do it. if
We'll have
it's
to
not real.
continue. Yeah.